Hello and welcome to Honoring Grief. Today is October the 15th, 2023. And we're seeing so many catastrophes around the world, and in so many ways, these spaces to process grief, both somatically and spiritually and holistically and psychologically, is so well needed. And so some of you may be watching this much later on from different places around the world and at different times of your life. And I hope that some small practice or message that is shared here will enable that sense of freedom from grief and loss. So I first want to introduce my lovely co-host, Imani Sorhindo.
Good
We
evening,
will
everyone. Welcome.
Hello. So would you like to introduce
Thank
Sharon?
you. Well, thank you. We're really truly blessed to have our two mindful facilitators here this evening, practitioners. And let me share a little bit about both of them with you so you know how truly blessed we are this evening to have their knowledge and their expertise in this area around grief and bereavement and losses. First introducing Hycinth Taylor, give a wave, Hycinth. Hycinth has extensive experience in delivering mindfulness courses, workshops, retreats, and long retreats, both in the UK and also abroad. Hycinth is a registered mindfulness network teacher and supervisor within the UK. Within the UK Mindfulness Network organization and the Mindfulness Network for People of Color as well, which is this organization. She's completed her training in delivering mindfulness from an African perspective to help reclaim historical wisdom and healing. And that's Bamba registered. So in the peace of and spirit of Ubuntu, welcome to Hyacin. And welcome to Sharon Brown. Sharon Brown, LCSW, founder of Self-Care U Academy, and is recognized as a leading authority on self-care. Her life experiences led her to the path of healing and self-discovery and recognizing her identity beyond her profession. She noticed a lack of emphasis on self-care in both the workplace and personal life, which often resulted in stress and burnout. And Sharon's natural ability as a facilitator and guide and connector has enabled her to fulfill her purpose of empowering, guiding, and connecting others towards holistic wellness of the mind, body, and spirit. So, welcome, Sharon. Welcome, Hyacin. And we're going to start by introducing Hyacin to share with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Imani. That was lovely. Thank you, Will, also. And welcome, everyone. So I'm just going to invite us all to just take a moment just to honour or hold in mind the lives lost over in the Middle East. So just taking a moment's silence with me. So when you're ready, just bring your attention back into your space. So this workshop is designed to help support us in honouring the loss of our loved ones. So none of us can escape the process of grieving, mourning, and loss. Mourning can be up and down, filled with grief, pain, and for most of us it can be a very lonely process. Grief is emotional pain, whilst mourning is the attempt to try and cope with that pain. As we mature through life, there's more of an acceptance of the changes and loss and the transitions that we face as a result of aging and a deteriorating body, changes in health, mobility, while we're also looking into the face of our own mortality. And that can be painful. So I'd like to invite you to just find a posture that is upright, dignified, and supports you as we share a practice together. So a short practice of around 20 minutes. So you can either close your eyes or just lower your gaze, whatever feels right. So the invitation now is to just bring awareness onto the breath. So just feeling where your breath is right now. Just observing the movement and the flow of the breath. So right now there's nothing for you to do. There's nowhere else for you to be. So just allow yourself to surrender into the moment, into this moment of stillness and calm. If you notice that you're holding on or bracing in any way, just let it go. Surrender and let go. Find your stillness. And that place of calm. So maybe allowing yourself to go deeper. As you observe the sensations of your in-breath and the flow of the out-breath. So the invitation now is to just begin to bring to mind someone perhaps that is dear to you that you lost. So just holding that person in mind as you allow your heart to soften, as you honour that person with all the glory, the love and the warmth that they deserve, just holding them in your heart, allowing your face to smile. Your heart to smile. allowing your body to soften in stillness. As you remember the person that you lost with love, warmth, compassion, and kindness. So as you hold that person in mind, I'm going to read a poem, The Dash, and just staying as you are. I read of a person who stood to speak at a funeral of a loved one. They referred to the dates on the casket from beginning to end. They noted the first date came as a date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears in their eyes. But they said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on this earth. And now only those who love them know what that dash or that line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, our cars, our home, our cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our time during the dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left. That can still be arranged. If you could just slow down and consider what is true and real, and always try to understand the way others may feel. So just taking a deep breath in, letting it out. One more time in, and letting it out. And when you're ready, in your own time, you may open your eyes and bring your awareness back into the space. Yeah, so just taking in each other on the screen, just noticing who you're with, who's present with us right now. As we bring our attention back and bring ourselves back into this space. So just connecting with each other. Thank you. So I'm gonna hand you over to the lovely Sharon from across the sea there, and Sharon's gonna take us through the next part of this workshop. So thank you, Sharon. Over to you.
And thank you for that lovely period of silence. And can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you.
But we can see some other notes and things. Thank you.
All right. And so again, welcome to Honoring Grief. And so with my part of the session is I will talk about the creation. Shall I say honoring grief came out of grief and gratitude. So I'll talk about the creation of that, and then what is grief and bereavement, stages of grief, and we'll be sharing your loved one's story to honor their legacy. And so, with grief and gratitude, again, honoring grief came out of grief and gratitude, which was a workshop that I held, I believe, about 2 years ago. And I will probably say maybe about, I'd say a couple years before my mom's passing, I had wanted to do a workshop on grief. It was just something that I guess you could say that was pulling me. And, it was heavy on my mind, heavy on my mind. And then after my mom's death, then I'm like, now is the time. And for me, when it came to death, I felt like before my mom's passing, I had I just say a certain way of looking at it where I've always looked at it, as a part of life. And just, and I don't know, is it because when I was younger, I saw just a lot of, um, I don't want to say extreme sadness, but like for a child, it seems extreme. I'll put it in that way. And I know that, like, when it came to my mom, I knew that I didn't want to be in a state of sadness. And so, in creating the workshop, that was a way for me to pretty much, excuse me, to pretty much honor her. And so I wanted to share this quote with you. What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us. So I hope that when it comes to your loved ones, this is how you can remember them, that they will always be a part of you. And so I wanted to ask for everyone here, what does grief mean to you?
Sharon, do you
Or
want
anyone?
people to unmute and just speak up, or do you want them to put their hands up?
Either way.
Okay. So please just feel free to unmute yourself and say hello and your name, where you're coming from, and what does grief mean to you?
Hello, my name is Zenobia Lardner. Zenobia. I'm in Eastbourne in the United Kingdom, and yeah, I came on tonight because it occurred to me that there might be things that I am grieving, or people or places that I'm grieving that I hadn't considered I was grieving. So I lost my parents many years ago, and I remember what that was like, particularly with my mother. I grieved my father as well, hugely, but with him, there was a sense of release because he had had Alzheimer's and a number of other conditions. And he had been lingering, you might say, for 5 years after he had a major stroke. But I had time to kind of walk a bit with him emotionally and imaginatively in that period, and to make my peace with him, and also to understand the ways in which I was like him, and to see him as a separate human being from being my father. So it was a really important way for me to honor him on his way. So when he died, I was sad, but I also felt a release of joy and a real powerful letting go for him. It was a bit different with my mother, in fact, very much different, because I was a total mummy's girl. And it had taken me years to understand that she would leave one day. So, and for that, I did go through what feels much more like a wrenching process, really, even though my mum was 80. I mean, I know, and she was also somebody who had always said, when I'm ready to go, that'll be it, and don't grieve for me that way. But I did, and it did seem to go on for quite a while. But how do you measure that? I don't know. I don't know. But grief, to me, seems to be a really important way of not only letting go of people we love, but also kind of it's a whole process and for me, I think about it now, a process of integrating all the beauty of who they were as part of me, particularly my parents, but this is true of friends as well, and integrating and releasing as well, because they're on a new journey, and they're not going to stay the same. They're not who we know on the planet. After a while, they become something else. They evolve, and yeah. So grief is a kind of long goodbye, but it's also a deep, deep well wishing for that being as much as for myself. Yeah, that's kind of where I am with that.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for sharing. And so when it comes to grief, I guess you can say, to kind of understand everything that was just spoken, because a lot of times we feel it, and then there are different definitions, and this is just to help understand it better. It's all inclusive. And so when it comes to loss, it's the departure of something deeply shared. Um, may it be a loved one, a treasured possession, or a beloved pet. And we all will, if we haven't already, will have something that will be lost. And then when it comes to grief, as it was magnificently explained, this is what it looks like, because it is multifaceted. It's the reaction to the loss, and encompass, emotions, cognitive, physical, social, and behavioral aspects. And as it was just in such a loving way of explaining real life of how the loss of one person can show up very different from the loss of someone else. And even though it can be one person who experienced two different losses. And then the bereavement is the process, is that period of adjusting and adapting to a loss. And we've always heard that there are no specific time. It can be where I would say, someone can lose someone and you continue with life, and then sometimes there can be a memory of something that for some individuals, it's a memory, and then for others, it can set someone back. And as the young lady has just explained, when with her mother, that was much more challenging for her. And so, just in saying, when it comes to bereavement, it shows up different for each person, and then it can show up different of who we lost as well. And then when it comes to mourning, mourning is the grief response, which is influenced mostly by cultural. Depends on where we live in the world, depends on our family background. Everyone can be influenced and so different. I know that like in the US, because the US, I would say, is multicultural, so there are different individuals who may see it different. And even within the same, let's say, city and town, it can be different, but definitely culturally. I remember there was this one lady who lost her mother, and she is of Asian descent. And of that particular culture, they knew that her mom was going to be passing, and they have pretty much set up like a celebration ritual where they do different things, like days when they anticipate the days before the passing. There's particular things to do, and whereas in other cultural may not, I say, have that acknowledgement, because some cultures view it in such a tremendous loss where they're not able to do that. So again, each culture is different. And then we have the stages of grief. And with the stages of grief, initially there were 5, and now there's 7. Then sometimes depends on where you look. I think I saw somewhere there was like 11. And one way that I like to look at the stages of grief is that these are patterns and concepts that someone, and even maybe you yourself, have noticed. And so they're not anything that are like set, and it doesn't mean that everyone would need to go through every single, and they're not in any particular order as well. And with the original stages of grief, it was Kubler and Ross who had created the stages of grief. And so there's shock, denial, anger, and bargaining, and there's a few more on the other page. And so when it comes to shock, for most individuals, it's that initial paralysis at hearing the news. And that for some individuals, it can last just a few moments, a few seconds. It's like, oh my, what just happened? It's the hearing of the news. And then the other thing is sometimes it may not be the hearing of the news of the death. It can be like if someone had just been rushed, like gotten in an accident or had been rushed to the hospital, or changes where it may seem like that um, their particular experience is going towards death. And so that can be the initial paralysis of hearing the news. And then there's that denial, is when someone is trying to avoid the inevitable. especially, once death has occurred. It's the unbelievable. Sometimes you may hear someone say, "Well, I just spoke with that person yesterday. We just talked 2 weeks ago. They seem like to be in good health, especially like if it wasn't related to an accident." And so denial is that inevitable. And then there's anger. And when it comes to anger, sometimes for us, um, for individuals who are supporting someone with a loss, sometimes we may not know how to support someone, because when it comes to an overbearing of sadness and then the outpouring of bottled up emotions, sometimes the person who is trying to support someone may not always have the emotional space to do that. And one thing I would say about when it comes to anger and even the sadness, sometimes we may try and um, I'll just say, I know it's here in the US, in that there's this thing where, like no one likes to see no one like sad or, as I say, unhappy. And so sometimes someone may try and cheer someone up. But what I will offer you and invite you is to be able to host space where that person is. And even if it is anger, if that person has an outburst, to allow that to happen and to create a containment for that person. And sometimes some individuals may need to yell, may need to cry, may need to go out for a run or a walk, but it's important for um, to allow that person to experience that. And if you are supporting that person, sometimes you may not always know that ahead of time, but if you happen to know that you'll be supporting someone ahead of time, make sure that you put in support things for yourself so you can have the emotional capacity to support that person. And then there's bargaining. And bargaining is pretty much when someone is seeking a way out or seeking to escape, when you can say it can be attached to the denial, and they just can't take it and they just want to get away. They may bury their head under the sand. They may isolate themselves a little bit more. And so again, these are uh, stages of grief. And then there's depression, and that's the realization of the inevitable, that the passing of the person is real. It's the realization of the truth. And again, for each individual, some individuals may not actually experience depression, so they can come to the realization of the inevitable without going into or experiencing, I would say, like the clinical definition of depression. And then there is a stage that's considered as testing, where you're seeking out realistic solutions, meaning more like you're looking for ways to cope, you're looking for ways to pretty much move forward, and you're almost kind of like testing the water. It's like, is this really true? And then the acceptance part of it is, it's not only just in seeking, but you're also finding the way forward, and you're accepting. So yes, the truth is that my loved one has moved on. And one thing I'd really want to invite you when it comes to any stages of grief, One of the things that I feel that really gets left out is what I call the visceral effect of grief. It meanings like we have the emotions, but the visceral is like what goes through your body. Like sometimes you may feel tightness in your chest or your shoulders. I know for me, it was the days coming pretty much once my mom was placed in hospice because of her condition. That was when I guess you say it was real for me, and I just felt this hardness in my stomach and this quivering. I knew exactly what it was. And I had a friend who happened to be visiting me, and they were able to lead me into a practice of breathing exercise. And so that's something to really just keep in mind when it comes to the stages of grief, especially in I would say the first stage of that shock of just hearing the news of what's going on. I guess if any way to support someone. Like sometimes you may not have to actually say, breathe with me. For some individuals, you may, especially when it comes to the anger part of it, it is allowing them to, or allowing yourself to experience that, but to also to be able to soothe and settle the nervous system. And so I wanted to share this quote with you is time will not heal your grief. It's the effort that you make it in that time that will bring about healing. When you become mindful about where you want this journey to take you, healing will begin to take place in your life. And so before we move on, do anyone have any questions regarding the definitions that I shared or the stages of grief?
Please feel free to unmute yourself. You haven't spoken. Actually, what I will do